Pokemon Scarlet and Violet has had quite a rocky launch and has continued to face criticism over the last 2 years. Some fans have completely torn the games to shreds due to its poor performance issues, and other fans have praised Gen 9, saying that they are their favorite Pokemon games of all time. With that said, I think that we can all agree that Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are definitely not perfect games. My name is Mitch, and in today's video, we're going to be discussing, is Pokemon Scarlet and Violet still bad? I'm going to say that first and foremost, if you're looking for a video that is going to completely destroy Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, then click off now because this video is not for you. This video is meant to be insightful. So whether you put the game down and are contemplating coming back, or if you're shopping for yourself or a loved one for the upcoming holiday season, I hope you walk away with some sort of value. So first of all, let's talk about what makes the game bad. If you've been on any sort of social media over the past 2 years, you've probably seen comments like these. Now, there is some validity to these comments, so let's dive in. Scarlet and Violet are Pokemon's first truly open world games, and it has a pretty big region at that. With that said, Paldea is vast, but it's also pretty empty. With cities and towns randomly scattered throughout the region, there's very little cohesion to make Paldea feel like an actual place. Speaking of towns, other than a few sandwich shops, there are very few buildings in this game that you can actually go into, further detaching these games from their predecessors and making the world seem smaller than it actually is. Also, in pretty much every other Pokemon game, the music that people remember is the music from the cities. In this game, it's the complete opposite. The towns are so boring that I don't even remember the music, and I'm someone that casually listens to Pokemon music. A popular meme in the Pokemon community is making fun of Hoenn and how it's mostly water. I think Paldea is kind of the same in that it is 90% mountains. And also there's 3 desert-like biomes, which again are big, but also boring. So yeah, the world building in Scarlet and Violet is kind of lackluster. Every single game that comes out has some sort of bugs at launch. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is unique in the fact that not only does it have bugs at launch, but it also has bugs 2 years later into its life cycle. I feel like the world building being seemingly incomplete has a lot to do with this. I mean, you can still glitch through the floor to this day. At launch, there were tons of bugs and glitches reported. Glitching through the floor, your ride Pokemon becoming completely invisible, and tons of game crashes. I think the game crashes have probably the most impact on the game's reputation. Thankfully, Scarlet and Violet does have an autosave feature, but if you're a shiny hunter like myself, you probably have that turned off. It's a risk, but it's one I'm willing to take, even though I have lost some shiny Pokemon due to game crashes. At one point, there was a huge issue before the DLC was about to drop, where some players, their save data leaked. Pretty much what this meant was these players would go to play their game, and their save data would be completely gone. Some people thought it might have something to do with pre-ordering the DLC. Other people thought maybe it had something to do with connecting your game to Pokemon Go, because these issues started happening whenever these two features began. This only happened to 10 people around the entire world, but it was enough to cause panic in the entire Pokemon community. Now, I will give Nintendo credit because they themselves personally reached out to these people and were able to restore their save data, so good on them. Most of these issues have been fixed with the occasional game crash, but I mean, games just naturally crash sometimes. Just like a side note, I've played Scarlet and Violet for almost 1,000 hours, and I think my game has crashed maybe 3 times. One of the main things that people point out about Scarlet and Violet is the visuals. The color palette is muddy looking, and the world's colors are just undersaturated. In games past, the colors are very vibrant. This kind of undersaturated look makes it seem like they're trying to take the game into a more realistic based setting, as opposed to the cartoony, vibrant look we've seen in past games. In my opinion, I do like the concept. I just think the execution is just not there at all. All of the Pokemon models have been desaturated, but I actually kind of like this because it makes it feel like the Pokemon are part of the world, and it works really well, especially since when you initiate a battle, it happens in the world around you. So these Pokemon models being desaturated makes them seem more natural and fluid and actually a part of the world, which I think is really cool. Some parts of the world are just super pixelated, like buildings way off in the distance, or Pokemon that are kind of far away. This is because the Switch would have to render more polygons to keep up with the consistent resolution, but this would also sacrifice performance on an already underperforming game. To combat this, objects at a certain distance are a little more pixelated. You see this Pokemon in the distance? Looks like crap. Now look what happens whenever we initiate a battle. I'll take this very small flaw over underperformance any day. I think one of the biggest issues that people have with this game is the frame rate. At best, you're looking at maybe 30 frames per second, but due to the performance of this game, you're likely running at a little lower than that. This is particularly true in areas that spawn a lot of Pokemon, or it's raining, or snowing, or pretty much like any like weather effect. This stuff causes like the frame rate to drop super low. It seems like water is like really this game's like worst nightmare because your frame rate drops so low whenever you're in the water. When the game was still new, Game Freak did like release a patch that kind of helped frame rate in some areas, and pretty much what this did was it despawned NPCs and limited the amount of Pokemon that could spawn at once. Now this did help the frame rate just in like certain areas, but still if you're like swimming around in the water or it's raining, like your frame rate still dips like super low. In my opinion, this is not like a deal breaker for me. Like it doesn't make the game unplayable. It's not like a game breaking thing. A big one for myself and others is like the game's difficulty. This is probably one of, if not the easiest Pokemon games of all time. The gym battles are underwhelming. There's no level scaling. You have a wide pool of good Pokemon to choose from pretty much right off the bat. And the Elite Four in this game is a total snoozer. I literally, when I faced the Elite Four for the first time, I was literally falling asleep. I was literally dozing off the entire time. I'm not joking. That actually happened. I was half asleep whenever I beat, what's her face? Geeta. But I also just spammed Torch Song the whole time. But still, like, that shouldn't be, like, how you beat the Elite Four, just spamming one move. Super easy. That being said, there are some ways to make the game more difficult. Like I said, there is no level scaling, so you could always just face harder gyms first. But then again, that would also leave, like, the lower level gyms for later, meaning you're just going to face them whenever you're over leveled and just wipe the floor with them. You could also implement a rule where like you can only level up your Pokemon to like whatever the highest level the gym leader's ace is. You know, you kind of just got to get creative. Overall, all of the things that I've just listed have either been like fixed or tweaked, and out of all those things, none of them are like super game breaking. So if you're thinking, wow, that's not bad at all, you're right. It's not bad, like at all. Now let's talk about what makes the game good. There are obviously like a lot of things wrong with Scarlet and Violet. Like that's no one's questioning that. It's pretty much a known fact. But along with that, I think there are a lot of things that the game does right as well, like the story. Scarlet and Violet has 3 main storylines to complete. One focusing on gym battles, one focusing on Team Star, and one focusing on defeating the Titan Pokemon. Without getting into too many details and too spoilery, let's just go over them real quick. Victory Road is like your standard gym battle, you know, get all 8 gym badges, become the champion, yada yada yada. Starfall Street follows the story of Team Star, and pretty much Team Star is just like a bunch of delinquents that were bullied in school and were outcasted by the school. So that's, you know, honestly kind of relatable, to be honest. And the Path of Legends follows the story of Arven, who's on a quest to defeat the Titan Pokemon and collect Herba Mystica to save his aging Mabosstiff. Mabosstiff? I don't know which one. All these storylines tie in together at the very end, where you explore the crater, aka Area Zero. And this is honestly one of my favorite like plots and favorite places in the entire franchise. So if you're looking for a story that's like relatable, gives you a sense of accomplishment, and kind of tugs at your heartstrings a bit, I definitely recommend Scarlet and Violet. As I said before, the characters are super relatable. All of Team Star represent groups of kids that would probably typically get bullied in high school. Penny is like super smart, but also super introverted. Larry is an overworked middle-class citizen like myself. And honestly, I think every single character in this game is designed perfectly. I mean, look at Arven's hair. It's so good. If you're not like me and have friends, well, this is the game for you, because Scarlet and Violet offers a true cooperative experience. On top of being able to raid together, you can actually see and interact with each other in the overworld. This also means that the other person's spawns will spawn in your world too, so you can actually catch a version exclusive Pokemon without trading. Not only that, but you can also make sandwiches together and shiny hunt together. Since the game's launch, there's been no shortage of events. Things like super strong 7-star raid bosses that require strategy and team synergy, to things like promoted mass outbreaks that have shiny odds boosted, kind of like Pokemon Go community days. We're not getting a new Pokemon game until Pokemon Legends ZA, which isn't coming out until next year, which as of recording doesn't even have a release date yet. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet shows no sign of letting off the gas like when it comes to these events. So I'm hopeful that we're not going to be running out of things to do anytime soon. As of right now, we have a huge Shiny Rayquaza raid event coming up, and on top of that, there are still 6 legendary Pokemon in the game that are completely shiny locked. Like, there is no doubt in my mind that at some point in this game's lifetime, we're going to get these shiny Pokemon in some sort of like event. I think it'd be really cool to have like a 7-star shiny Miraidon / Koraidon event. I think that'd be really cool. As opposed to like the dogs, like the shiny dogs that got distributed in Sword and Shield just through like mystery gift. I think that's kind of boring. I like to earn my shiny Pokemon. If you're into the competitive scene at all, this is definitely the game to be doing it. It's super easy to get battle ready Pokemon with things like mints, ability patches, and even bottle caps being super easy to obtain. On top of that, the Terra mechanic kind of adds like another layer of competition when it comes to battling. Like, your Pokemon can change its type in an instant, and that can definitely turn the tide of battle. Not only that, but the competitive format is always changing, so therefore the meta is always changing. You're always having to change your team. You're always having to adapt to whatever the current format is. And it's honestly really engaging. Now, I'm just starting to scratch the surface of what this game has to offer. Everything I've listed above is pretty much available just in the base game. I haven't even talked about the DLC yet. In the Teal Mask DLC, you're introduced to Kitakami, which is like a Japanese-themed area, which is part of like an unknown region. I have a feeling that it's part of Johto, because there are like a lot of Johto Pokemon that come back in this DLC. You're also introduced to Kieran and Carmine, who are siblings that live in Kitakami. I think these two are incredibly well written, and their story carries over from the Teal Mask to the Indigo Disc. Over the course of the Teal Mask and the Indigo Disc DLCs, you see an incredible amount of character progression from these two. Character progression that I don't think we've ever seen in a Pokemon game. In the beginning, we're led to kind of like despise Carmine because she's kind of just like the bratty, know-it-all big sister, and sympathize with Kieran because he's kind of like the timid little brother, and he admires you because, you know, you're a strong trainer. During a big plot point in the story, those roles end up swapping, and I think it's honestly like the best story that we've gotten like for our counterparts in anything that Game Freak has ever done. It also adds to the story that like I feel like your character is kind of like the catalyst that, you know, causes Kieran's turning point. Also in the Teal Mask, we get access to Ogre Oustin, which is like a kind of like a racing minigame, kind of not a racing minigame. And then we're also introduced to one of my new favorite legendary Pokemon ever, Ogerpon, which plays a pivotal role in the Teal Mask story. This expansion is pretty short, and the area is pretty small, but I think the value is all there. In the Indigo Disc, your character attends the Blueberry Academy, which is located somewhere off of the coast of Unova. Alongside that, we can now visit the Terrarium, which is a completely underwater dome that is home to hundreds of Pokemon species. The terrarium is split into 4 separate biomes, those being coastal, canyon, savanna, and polar. This DLC is a little more battle heavy and sees the return of double battles, which we only really saw like one double battle in the base game, which is just like a gym leader battle. We also see the return of the Elite Four, which Kieran is the champion of. That's not a spoiler because they tell you pretty much right off the bat whenever the DLC starts. Did I also mention that the music in this expansion is just remixed black and white music? There are tons of different characters in this expansion, some of which are related to black and white characters, like Drayton is the grandson of Drayden. After the main story is complete, you head to the underdepths of Area 0, which before this was inaccessible. This is where you'll find Terapagos, and pretty much the entire climax of the story is here. There's also a little cutscene at the Crystal Pool afterwards. Unfortunately, like, neither of these expansions answer the questions that we were left with after the base game ended. So really, like, the answers and like the ending is kind of like up to interpretation. But honestly, I feel like that's the same with like any Pokemon game and like all of like the lore with Pokemon as well. One of my favorite things about the Indigo Disc DLC is after you upgrade each biome, every single starter Pokemon from Gens 1 through 8 will start spawning in the terrarium, meaning that you can go out in the wild, you can catch them, you can battle them, you can even shiny hunt them. They spawn normally like any other Pokemon, which is crazy. I don't think any Pokemon game has ever done this before. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you need to buy these games and that you need to come back and play these games if you've already bought them. The purpose of this video was for me to highlight the pros and cons of the game so you can make an informed decision on your own. Overall, I think these are like genuinely really solid games. I definitely think like the pros heavily outweigh the cons. I have almost 1,000 I have almost 1,000 hours in these games, and I'm still finding things to do. These games definitely aren't perfect, but they definitely are worth it. Thanks for watching. See ya.